Good morning, Ohio State fans. Welcome into the 11 Dubcast. Dan Hope filling in for George Eisner today. George lives in Charleston, South Carolina, and they had a big internet outage on Tuesday night. So I am filling in for him today. George will be back tomorrow with Andy Anders. But for today, I'm pleased to be joined by Josh Poloha, who I believe is making his 11 Dubcast debut. Is that correct, Josh?
I'm making my 11 podcast debut, or 11 Warriors podcast debut, let alone Dubcast. I've never been on podcast before. So
Wow.
Now I do have a face for radio. I guess in this case, I have a face for blogging. So now you get to see my face.
I think we both have a face for radio here, but it's a pleasure to have you on the show with us here today, Josh. You do a great job every week breaking down Julian Sayin's passing chart for us. So we're going to get into that in just a moment. First of all, want to give a shout out to our sponsor, the First Bank of Central Ohio, the official bank of 11 Warriors. From game day to work day, First Bank of Central Ohio, they are proud to support the business owners that keep Central Ohio thriving. Locally owned, business focused, and always in your corner. Give them a visit at fbcentralohio.com. As I mentioned before, Josh, every week, every Tuesday, breaks down Julian Sayin's passing chart for us on 11warriors.com. And those passing charts have been quite picturesque so far this year if you're an Ohio State fan, because Julian Sayin is currently leading the nation in completion percentage. He has been the most accurate quarterback in the entire country. Looking at his stats right now, he is 78 of 99 for 987 yards, 10 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. So for a quarterback who had really never really even played before this year, what he's done in his first 4 starts as Ohio State starting quarterback, I don't think we could have asked for much more. But I'll ask you, Josh, as someone who's watched every throw he's made this season, charted every throw he's made this season, what are the biggest things that have stood out to you about Julian Sayin for these first 4 games?
The biggest thing would be he's accurate. I think he's even more accurate than we could have even hoped for, especially early on. I mean, started at Texas. He not only just accurate, but he's composed. He's playing like he's like a redshirt junior or a senior, not a redshirt freshman. And just, I know people are hating on him for the deep ball. He's only thrown 9 throws over 20 plus yards all season so far. It's 4 games. Just enjoy. He's young still. I mean, it's weird to think of him being like a young quarterback, but he is. I think just imagine what it's going to be like once he starts throwing the deep ball more. Because I know against Washington, he feasted on the short throws. His first throw over 10 yards came with 3 minutes, first completion over 10 yards came with 3 minutes left in the third quarter. And he just threw what Washington gave him. So if you're going to feast on that, give it to your playmakers early and often and just let them go to work.
Yeah, I totally agree with you about what you said about he doesn't seem like a redshirt freshman. Like he seems like a veteran out there. And I think that's an important context when you talk about that passing chart from a Washington game where, as you said, I mean, he didn't throw a deep ball against Washington. He didn't throw a pass that went over 20 yards in the air and didn't have his best game as an intermediate passer, was only 2 for 6 on throws over 10 yards. But on throws within 10 yards of a line of scrimmage, he went 20 of 22. And I think that goes back to what you're talking about his ability to manage the game, to make the right decisions, the composure that he has. You know, a lot of times of a young quarterback, you see them taking too many deep shots. There's too much trying to make the big play. And I think Julian has done a great job in these first 4 games of taking what's there. He doesn't, I mean, really, like, I mean, you know, you had a couple interceptions, but like outside of those interceptions, like there's been, you know, sometimes you look at a quarterback and say, okay, he's got 3 interceptions, but there's like 10 other passes that could have been picked. Like he had 3 interceptions. Those are really the only passes I can think of that like could have been picked. Like he doesn't force throws into bad spots. He's very smart. He's very composed. And I think in that Washington game too, something you saw was there was more pressure on him in that game than there had been in the first 3 games. And it didn't fluster him. It didn't lead him into bad decisions. He, like you said, he took what was there. He managed the offense efficiently. Also used his legs a little bit, which I think was a big step forward for Julian, because while that's not something that necessarily shows up in the passing chart, it's an important aspect of the game. Something that Ryan Day talked about on Tuesday is something that he thought was a step forward for Julian Sayin against Washington.
Yeah, I mean, I know I do passing charts, but I would say the most, and I told you this multiple times, I would say the most impressive thing about his game on Saturday was his scrambling ability, or just ability to move within the pocket while keeping his eyes downfield. I know the one to Carnell Tate, where Carnell Tate made an incredible throw. Julian Sayin moved to his left, kept his eyes downfield, found Carnell Tate. He did it again with the Max Clare throw. And looking at that Max Clare throw too, if you remember in the Texas game, when Jeremiah Smith was very angry that Julian Sayin didn't throw it to him downfield, it was the same exact throw to Max Clare, but his first game to his fourth game, he had his timing a split second earlier, and boom, it was right there. So like you said, it's not just his running ability, which played a part in the success against Washington. I mean, I know the one time it got him within, I think it went from like a 45 or 42 yard field goal, like a 35-yard chip shot. And just like his ability, not only whether he's scrambling or not, but just his ability to move within the pocket and still keep his eyes downfield.
As you mentioned before, there's been a little bit of discourse here over the last couple of days about the deep ball and basically the lack of deep balls that Ohio State is throwing. As you mentioned, you look at his passing chart for the season, he's only thrown, I think based on your numbers, it's 7, 9. Or 9. It's 9.
Yeah, 9.
He's only thrown 9 passes on the season over 20 yards downfield. And so there's been some questions about, like, is he not taking the deep shots that are there? Is Ohio State holding him back? Is Ohio State not dialing up those deep plays? I think that certainly was the case against Texas, and I think it was at least somewhat the case again against Washington, where I think in both those games, Ohio State put a big emphasis on ball control, on time of possession, and they didn't really want to take a lot of shots in those games. I think against Grambling in Ohio, we saw a little bit more of that. I think we will see more of it as the year progresses. But I think you just look at what he's done. I mean, he's completed every deep ball he's thrown this year. So I think the ability is clearly there based on the success. I think, Ohio State, maybe they're not calling some plays for Julian Sayin right now, but maybe they were calling for CJ Stroud in year 2, or Will Howard last year, when those guys were more experienced. But I think, the statistics show, and even just some of the clips we've seen of him, there were a couple beautiful throws. I think it was, I don't remember Grambling, Ohio at this point, but there were a couple beautiful throws in those games, really hitting those deep balls. I think the ability's there. I think Ohio State's just kind of being cautious right now with Julian Sayin, still just a month into his tenure as starting quarterback.
Yeah, I think like part of it is, yes, being cautious with a first-year starter, redshirt freshman, but I also think that Julian Sayin, why, when you have the playmakers that you do, that you can give, like Jeremiah Smith, he gave them the ball literally right on the line of scrimmage, wide open touchdown for the first score, or the first touchdown of the game at Washington. But when you have the playmakers that you do on the outside, and you have the defense that you do, why take risks downfield when you can just dump it off for 5 yards and gain 20, rather than eventually he's probably like against Penn State, or maybe against Illinois, probably against Michigan. If they make the Big Ten championship game, then the college football playoff, he will eventually have to take those risks. But early on, why take a risk when you can just dump it off, maybe take a little bit longer of a time of possession, and rather than take a risk and risk a turnover, take a longer possession, and worst comes to worst, you punt the ball away and give it to the best defense in the country.
And I think we saw it last year with Will Howard. I mean, they kind of slow played him, and then all of a sudden in the CFP, it was like bombs away. So I think there is probably a little bit of that too with Ryan Day and Brian Hartline, of like, let's not show all our cards too early. Now, that being said, I think this week against Minnesota, my guess, like my prediction when we do our last call at the end of the week, is going to be we're going to see several deep balls from Julian Sayin, because I think, probably the last home night game of the year, I think they're going to open up the offense a little bit more this week. Let him cook a little bit, against an opponent in Minnesota who I think they're pretty confident they can beat comfortably. I think in those games, I think Washington was an opponent, like they knew it was going to be a tough game, so they didn't really want to take any unnecessary risks, like you said. But I think a game like this week against Minnesota at home, I think gives them more of an opportunity to continue working on that deep passing game, continue building some comfort in that area. Outside of that, Josh, just looking at his passing charts from the first 4 games of his season, is there anything else you would pinpoint as an area that Julian still needs to work on, still needs to grow in?
I would say, looking at it, the middle of the field, between the hashes, it's not he's struggling in that area, but he has literally only thrown 7 passes out of his, I guess if you count the one behind the line of scrimmage, it was a interception. He's thrown 8 passes between the hash marks out of his 71 passes. So, I mean, it's not that big of a deal right now, but I would say using that third of the field more often, just so you don't have tendencies and stuff that people will lean on going forward. Well, not going forward, but just like when you get into the bigger matchups, maybe shifting those tendencies. I mean, 8 passes within the hash marks is crazy 4 games in.
I'm guessing you might be looking at the chart from a week ago because he's thrown 99 passes now. I think I see.
Oh wait, yes, I did not update my. Now that you say that, I did not. Yes, 8 out of his 99. I must have included the wrong passing chart in my whatever it is. But yeah, 8 out of his 99. So either way, he needs to throw the ball between the hash marks more often, just to not have it like tendencies that people can lean on.
And again, that's probably goes back to some of what you were talking about of like the risks of like there's more risk throwing the ball over the middle of the field than there is throwing the ball out to the sidelines. So that's probably part of it too, in terms of giving him more of those safe throws. As you talked about before, I think he's done a good job of using his feet, extending plays, finding those throws, going out to the sideline. So I think he's done a really good job of that. But like you said, continuing to diversify the passing game as the year goes along is going to be a big step, especially now going into month 2 for Julian Sayin.
Yeah, and I do want to correct myself. I somehow go back to the other story from after the Ohio game. He has thrown 12 passes between the hash marks out of 99, so still about the same. I guess he threw 4. That means he threw 4 in Washington, so that's good. He went from 8 the first 3 games to 4 against Washington. I mean, it's that. I feel like that's kind of nitpicking too. But for a team as good as Ohio State's been, and for a quarterback as good, I mean, he's leading the country in passing or completion percentage right now. You kind of have to nitpick in order to find flaws. So, like, it's important to also find flaws early on too, especially for the team.
We wouldn't have much to talk about if we didn't nitpick, because the team is
True.
4-0. They're ranked number 1 in the country. Lots of things going well, but as Ryan Day always says, the issues are always there. And so Ohio State still looking to find little ways to improve things, but I think we can both agree you're giving Julian Sayin a grade for the first month of the season. I mean, you got to give him an A, right?
A, yeah. I mean, A+ would be probably more long throws, but hey, if I mean, I don't know why I was so messed up. He has only thrown 7 downfield, so I don't know. It was a long work day prior to this. So only 7 downfield, but also 7 for 7. I mean, you literally cannot be more perfect than that. Would you rather him be 7 for 7 or like 10 for 17? You know what I mean? It's just one of those things where like he's perfect. You can't really hate on being perfect, even if he hasn't thrown the deep ball as often as some would like.
Efficiency is always a good thing, and in terms of completion percentage, nobody has been more efficient than Julian Sayin so far this season. So when you're talking about a redshirt freshman quarterback, a guy who had barely played last season, has made his first 4 starts, including a game against Texas, one of the best defenses in the country, and a road game at Washington, that is certainly an A in my book. And Josh, you are an A in my book too. We appreciate you coming on and making your 11 Dubcast debut here with me here today. Before we get out of here, want to once again thank our sponsor, First Bank of Central Ohio, the official bank of 11 Warriors. As mentioned before, George Eisner will be back tomorrow with Andy Anders. For now, he's Josh Poloha. I'm Dan Hope. This has been the 11 Dubcast. Have a great day.